Who likes time limits in video games? I don't need that kind of pressure. What am I, taking a midterm? Time limited missions are some of the most dreaded in all of gaming. I think when some games start running out of ideas for interesting challenges, they go, you know what, throw a timer up on the screen. That'll get their attention. A lot of the time, it just adds unnecessary stress on the player. Because while I might not be trying to rush through a level during normal gameplay, I'm certainly not dilly-dallying. I'm just trying to move along efficiently, and adding a time limit will just sour the whole experience. At least, that's what I used to think, until I played a little game called Pikmin. Or to be more specific, Pikmin 1, as that's what it's called on my Switch home screen. Does anyone else find it funny how they keep subtitling the first game in a series as 1 in these double packs? Tony Hawk 1 and 2, Advance Wars 1 and 2, and now Pikmin 1 and 2. I suppose it makes logical sense, but it's not super elegant. Anyway, one thing that makes this first Pikmin game unique is that it's entirely based around time limits. The game starts off with the main character, Olimar, crashing his spaceship on an unfamiliar planet, and he has only 30 days to fix it before his life support systems start to fail. Very grim for such a cute game. So you've got the 30-day limit stretch out over the course of the entire title, but then each day is divided up into about 15 minutes, and then you have to move on to the next one. Now, I had never played any Pikmin game before this, but I did have a vague idea of what it was like, including the fact that it had this time limit. And let me tell you, that was not an aspect of the game I was looking forward to for all the reasons I said before. I'm definitely one who appreciates a good challenge in video games, but to me, a time limit pretty often represents the worst the medium has to offer. More often than not, it feels like something the developers just threw into the mix when they couldn't think of anything else. Aside from moments where it's just a quick burst for cinematic reasons, oftentimes it takes away more than it adds. And while I still think the majority of games don't implement time limits very well, Pikmin is absolutely not one of them. In fact, I would say the time limit enhances and improves the entire experience to the point where the game wouldn't really work without it. So Pikmin is a real-time strategy game. If you're like me, when you hear that genre, you think of armies and generals and bloodshed, not cute little creatures running around a forest. But in the game, you as Olimar really only do one thing, and that's throw Pikmin. You throw them as a way to command them to take care of the rest of the actions in the game, like building bridges, defeating enemies, or if you play like I did, dying for no good reason. What the time limit does here is that it gives each action more importance. Everything you command the Pikmin to do, you're trying to make them as efficient as possible. You don't want any to just be standing around idly if you can help it. It's all about maximizing your resources. Even when you have a majority of the Pikmin carrying a part of your ship or destroying a wall, you're always thinking, is there something else I should be doing right now? You don't want a single second wasted because you know you only have so many. Simply put, it adds more strategy to the real-time strategy game. Let me give you a little example about how the time limit informs a lot of the design decisions of the game and provides a foundation for the main gameplay. Whenever you create a new Pikmin, you have to pluck them out of the ground individually. At first, when I started doing this, I thought, the way this works makes no sense. Why do you have to pull up each one at a time? Why can't there just be a button to get them all at once? All you have to do is hold the A button to pull them out anyway, so it's not like there's any challenge involved. But then I realized, it's because of the time limit. Pulling Pikmin out of the ground slowly is just another thing you have to account for when making the most out of each day. You don't want to spend any time gathering new Pikmin when all the ones out in the field aren't already working on something else. Plucking the Pikmin is just another thing you have to account for and think about strategically. And of course, this whole setup does sometimes result in the player messing up big time. Don't ask me how I know that. I admit, there were a good few days that ended up with me having less Pikmin than when I started with, and making very little progress to show for it. But ending a day without accomplishing everything you wanted to do puts the player in a very interesting predicament. Because sure, you could just continue on to the next day and try to make up what you missed then. Or you could restart the day and see if you can do things better. And there's pros and cons to both roads that are laid out for you. Just how confident are you that you can make up what you didn't accomplish yesterday? After all, you've only got 30 days. A few too many mess ups, and you could be staring down the barrel of only having a couple days left, with way too many parts left to still get. And going back and redoing a day doesn't necessarily mean you're losing progress, it just means you're making a different kind of progress. Sure, you might have to rebuild a bridge and defeat a few enemies again, but what you've gained is knowledge. There's no inventory system in Pikmin, but I would say that there's a mental inventory that you are building up over the course of the game. You learn what works, what doesn't, and how to tackle different situations. If this aspect of the game is what's appealing to you, another game I would really recommend checking out would be The Outer Wilds. Even though it appears pretty different, it actually has a lot more in common with Pikmin than you might think. Like Pikmin, it has a resetting timer and no inventory aside from what's in your head. So while messing up and not making the most out of a day doesn't feel great, the opposite end of the spectrum feels absolutely wonderful. There's an immense feeling of satisfaction you get when you have all your Pikmin forming a train of items and ship parts, bringing everything back to your base. Just look at this efficiency! Because there's no leveling up system or skill trees or anything like that, all advancements you make are you getting better at the game. The first few days you might fumble around a bit, wasting time and Pikmin, but by the end of it you can feel like an absolute master. Pikmin is a game about resource management, and time is just another resource that you have to learn to manage. It's the kind of thing you just want to get better and better at, and thankfully the game is aware of this and takes full advantage of it. Because Pikmin 1 lends itself very well to being replayed, it gives you a full breakdown of how you did when you complete the game, and shows the top 5 scores. It's also pretty short, so replaying it is not a daunting task. Once you get good, it could probably take you just a couple of hours. And so Pikmin 1 wouldn't be capable of reaching the highs that it does if it didn't have this time limit. It encourages you to be as efficient as possible, whether that's opening up shortcuts or being strategic about which enemies to fight. It really does make the game what it is. Even though I'd never played it, Pikmin is a series I'd been aware of for a very long time, mostly thanks to the public outcry demanding Pikmin 4 for the last 10 years. I always wanted to check it out, but I was unsure of how it would click with me. So once the Pikmin 1 and 2 double pack came out on Switch, I knew it was finally time to give the series a go. And I'm happy to say I absolutely loved this first entry. Real-time strategy is not a genre I've ever dove too deep into. I like a good turn-based strategy like Fire Emblem, but this was pretty new for me. And the experience was fantastic. It's always great when a new game scratches an itch that you didn't even know you had. And that's absolutely what Pikmin 1 has accomplished. And so next I'm looking at moving on to Pikmin 2, which I'm looking forward to, but from what I understand about the rest of the series, it doesn't have the same time limit that Pikmin 1 has. I'm sure all these games are fine without it, but it does make me a little disappointed, although not entirely surprised. A hard time limit on gameplay feels very un-Nintendo-like, because they're always trying to make games more approachable for new audiences. The gameplay of Pikmin is definitely good enough to stand on its own without the time limit, and these next 3 entries have a lot of positive word of mouth, so I'm not too worried, but playing the first one does make me appreciate how bold of a decision it was to add it. I wouldn't be surprised if there was disagreement among the development team on whether or not they should include it, but I think the risk really paid off. It's great when a game or mechanic you feel apprehensive about ends up winning you over, like Pikmin 1's timer did for me. It does make me wonder what games I'm presently avoiding might become my favorites after giving them a shot. That's one of the great things about video games. The diversity of genres, gameplay systems, and mechanics means there's always something new you haven't tried. And you'll never know what your next favorite game is until you finally sit down and play it.